Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. This is another episode of Wireframe brought to you by Design Systems House. I'm your host, Diane DiMato, and today we're going to be talking about an identity crisis. What is that all about? Well, you're going to have to keep listening, watching to find out. But in order to do that, I would like to bring on my next guest, my current guest for today, of course. We've had a couple over the last couple of weeks, and this has been excellent. We're on fire. Randy, thank you for joining us on the show today. I really appreciate it. Let the folks here at home know who you are and what you're all about.
Sure. So my name is Randy Oest. I go by the handle Amazing Rando just about everywhere on the internet. I am a UX UI designer at Sparkbox. I've been in the industry for more than 20 years, doing a lot of like really fun web stuff. One of my most recent projects, I led Emulsify, which was an open source tool for Drupal for creating themes for Drupal. It's used by like thousands of sites. So I've been in the industry quite a long time, and I'm really excited to be here. I really enjoy your work. I've recently bought your book. I'm currently going through it with a red pen editing. So, you know.
Wait a minute. Wait, what's going on? What have I screwed up? I went through so many edits. Goodness gracious. Speaking of the book, by the way, look at this. Hold on a second. Let me get over here. I actually got in a whole bunch of copies of the book, which is new because I think people thought that I had copies, which I had like, I guess, review copies. So now I have real actual copies that literally just came in today, which I suspect that I will be giving out in some events in the near future. So if you're ever in New York or in another event that I'll be at, I might have one to give you. But anyway, thank you for buying the book, Randy. I appreciate it. I'm very interested to know what the red pens are for sure. I'm looking forward to that. The theming stuff that you said that you were doing. Tell me how you got into the theming kind of ecosystem and the success there. I'm just curious.
Sure. So it all comes down to working as part of an agency. One of the kind of bottlenecks of doing design systems work or doing design work in general is needing to start from scratch over and over again. Yeah. And this is where like a lot of people have kind of like their house styles or house design systems. You know, they'll create a menu for one project and then they'll just kind of like throw it in a file somewhere and pull it out for the next project where it's appropriate. And I've always been a systems thinker. I've always wanted to make things better in small and large ways. Like one time I was working on business cards for an agency that I was working at, and they're like, hey, we need some more business cards. Instead of spending 45 minutes creating new business cards for everybody, I spent 3 hours creating like an InDesign file that imported an Excel or a Google sheet that then spit out PDFs. And so that meant that like the next time we needed business cards, people just needed to update the Excel spreadsheet and import it into InDesign, and it would spit out business cards on the other end, making it like really easy and really fast. And so for the next couple of years when we needed business cards, it was super easy. And that's a ridiculous example of this systems thinking that I do, but I like to find ways to make things easier over time. And yeah. I'm going
to challenge that for a second, just because I want you to know, I want everyone to, it's not ridiculous. That is 100% solving a problem out there. And I think, showing and I guess exercising that muscle to do that. I mean, that was clearly successful, right? I don't think it's ridiculous at all. So, but please continue. I'm very interested.
Absolutely. I mentioned that it's ridiculous just because of the fact that, something that took 45 minutes, I spent 3 hours on. But no,
But time saved.
I get,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So this kind of thinking that I have, whenever Pattern Lab came out on the scene, and Atomic Design came out on the scene, and all of this kind of like structure that we can provide and this reusability that happened, I really leaned into it. And I was part of a development team at the agency that I was working at. It was 4 kitchens, and we decided that we wanted to create kind of a base theme. And so we put together components like a lot of people did in Pattern Lab and made those components reusable. We gave it a name. We named what we created Emulsify. And the reason that we gave it a name was because we wanted it to be an open source project. We wanted to share it with the Drupal community. We wanted people to rally around it. We wanted people to use it. We wanted it to be something that was good for people who were in the Drupal space. There was a little bit of like business development splashed in, like being able to say that we've got this open source project that we contribute to help the Drupal space. But really at its core, it was creating an efficiency for us in how we work. Now, I myself, I'm a UX UI designer. I'm also a very competent front-end engineer. And so, going in and having all of those components exist in code was great. And I was very excited with Figma and a lot of its burgeoning tool set. Like whenever they opened up the capability to do plugins and Token Studio came on the scene, I was super excited because I wanted to create a UI kit in Figma that would sync up automagically with the code, and that was the next evolution of what we put out there. We created a Figma library with some raw components that you go in, you make some changes, and those changes then, populated via like design tokens to the code. Now, the front-end engineers still had to make changes because if I decided to, change something that wasn't codified as a token, then they would still have to make those changes, but it covered some of the real simple bits a lot more easily. And it was really nice. In fact, one year at DrupalCon, I had a demo going where I had a fake university website where, when people came to the booth, I would say like, hey, help me pick some colors and some fonts. And then I would like rerun the command line and it would generate a brand new kind of theme based on what they wanted. Now, this is all stuff that today, it's sort of becoming table stakes.
Yeah.
But it's, at the time it was bleeding edge and it was really pushing the envelope. And I really found that it helped me as a designer communicate better with my front-end engineers, and we had a better relationship as a result of it. There was less pushback because I was using things that were tested, and whenever I needed to make exceptions, I could use the language to say this is an exception that I want to make.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay, so we have a couple of things that I definitely want to pull out of there. The first thing I want to say is that the way that you identified yourself as your roles, you were very specific about saying that you are a UX UI designer and a very competent front-end engineer, right? Which I
Yes.
want to pull out there because that's similarly how I would introduce myself effectively 10 years ago. These days now, right, we see the role of design engineer being very popular. Do
Mhm.
you associate as a design engineer, or do you find yourself to be more comfortable separating those roles for yourself as I am a UX UI designer and a front engineer? Is that what do you feel more comfortable with in terms of knowing this popularity?
I think it's just a case of just old language getting stuck in my head.
Mm.
Like I've considered myself a UX UI designer for a long time and front end engineer. Like a lot of my titles were designer and front end engineer. And so that's just kind of stuck in my brain. I think the term design engineer is a great term and I absolutely adore it. For some reason, my brain just doesn't let me adapt and just say, hey, I'm a design engineer.
Mhm.
And I think part of that is whenever I think design engineer, and you know, no shade to anyone who is a design engineer, but I like to think of myself as more on the creative side than on the engineer side.
Mm.
And so for me, there's a difference whenever I say and front end engineer,
Yeah.
because it kind of makes a good demarcation. It comes back to language and like how we name things, which is part of what we're going to talk about today.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. So I like that you're basically being very deliberate in the choices that you're making for that role in there. Because I similarly, you know, if we're going to talk about design engineering, if I'm on a panel talking about it or whatever, sure, I'll lump myself in to the design engineer space, right? But for me, I now have been titling myself UX engineer actually for years now, specifically because I am very much focused on the user experience of the thing. It's not just the artistic design of it. That's you know, that's fun and you know, a piece of the puzzle. But the focus for me is always about the user and how we engineer the solution for that user. So that's why I'm deliberate in terms of saying, if I'm going to go ahead and put my name on something more generally, as opposed to design system architect, which is very specific, but if I say something like, you know, UX engineer, that ends up being more specific in the space or the realm that I guess we're talking about. The other thing that I want to ask you is, when you were describing this workflow of Figma to code and having the tokens describe things in Figma and then go to the code and things of that nature. I've always thought of the code being the source of truth, right? And the Figma being, you know, a representation of the source of truth. And I always find it interesting for folks who effectively have worked in the opposite way, where it kind of starts in Figma and goes to the code. And I do recognize the benefit of that, where the decisions about what color and typography are supposed to be, those are design decisions. They're not developer decisions necessarily, unless you're, again, a design engineer. So it does make sense that for them to happen in Figma. But how far were you able to go making the design decisions in Figma and having them affect code? Were you affecting more than color and typography? Like, how deep did that rabbit hole go?
Sure. It was color, typography, spacing, shadows. Uh, we we both were deep and also shallow. It was kind of a little bit uneven across the design system that we have. Now, when I say design system, I'm not talking about a design system in that like we built a specific product and it had a certain like look to it. What I was building was a method for us to create custom websites faster.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is, instead of creating a design system where we've got a product and maybe we want to add a new feature to the product and we have, you know, all of the different components that we need for that, what we're really doing is getting a leg up on the design process, like choosing those new colors, choosing those new experiences. But there are so many repeating patterns in the web that it was really easy to create some components to get a giant start on it, like having an image and text side by side. I mean, every website has that. That's a component that everybody needs. And so we were able to get, I'd say, 60-70% there with what we were trying to do. We were never trying to get to the point with Emulsify where the designer makes a few changes, ships it, you know, pushes the tokens to the repository, and then the website's going to look like the design. We were never trying to get one-to-one parity there. We were trying to get acceleration in the work that we were doing. And so having like 60-70% fidelity whenever we pushed made the front-end engineers who are working on it, made their work faster and made it more reliable too, because that in my career, one of the biggest frustrating points for me has been communicating with developers and making sure that everything kind of turns out right, like that design QA process. there was a point in my history where I would spend a week going through a website or an app saying like, this spacing is wrong, this spacing is wrong, this font size isn't right, and kind of like going through. And part of that was not having a shared bridge. Like when design tokens came on the scene, that I thought was absolutely brilliant, because now I can say my type ladder, I have a tendency to use t-shirt sizes for type ladders. And so I can just say, this is XL, this is SM, and the developers know exactly what that is. And so there's no confusion. They don't have to check like, what's the pixel size on this? What's the pixel size on that? It's defined in the work that I'm doing. And so it's easier to be picked up. And so that creates better, like faster quality controls. Like now, whenever I review things, a lot of it comes together super fast, and I only have a couple of things that I point out.
Yeah. No, it's very clear the power of design tokens and how it really accelerated the design decisions that we would make and allow that to propagate very deeply. I mean, much of the reason why I'm asking about, how deep you went in the decisions and the design tokens that you would have for code is that one of the things that I've played around with as an idea is that could we have design tokens for layout? And I think there's a world where it could have happened. I just don't think that, admittedly, our practice is necessarily ready for that level of customizability with the responsibility of what would happen downstream. And I say that specifically with the research that I did that ended up as Mise-en mode, but there was some research that I did called complementary space, which was all about contextual spacing and how we could have semantic tokens that represent space, not t-shirt sizing, but basically saying the amount of space in a particular region. And it's very, very hard to communicate to an organization or even other design system practitioners. And I think if that was more available, we could go to the next level and potentially consider things like layout and such. But I want to finally get to the topic at hand, because we've been talking 20 minutes about not the topic at hand. The topic at hand is specifically where, for folks who watch the show, and if you haven't been on the show, you should absolutely go to wireframe.ds.house and fill out the form on the bottom to be on the show. I'd love to have you and discuss things like that. This is what I had Randy do when we met him on the question last week. And he brought in this very simple yet very hot take about, not even really a take, just a question about, should a design system have a name? So tell me what your, I guess, take on the answer to this question is.
Sure. So I waffle back and forth. Should a design system have a name? Should it not have a name? And I generally come down on no. I don't think that a design system should have a name. I think that design systems they're plumbing. And I think that design systems, and they power other things. They're infrastructure. The HR department doesn't have a custom name for things that they do. There's sorry, the doorbell just rang. I don't know if you heard it. It threw me off. But whenever it comes to naming design systems, when you name something, you kind of create a barrier. So in my experience, when you have a named design system, suddenly there is a defense of the design system. There's you are outside the design system or you're inside the design system. And by creating that name, you're saying what is and what is not within the system. And that creates conflict and barriers, because in my experience, a design system is part of a product, and that product has things that may not end up in the design system. There may be exceptions that fall out of that. Now, whether those things should be folded into the design system or be considered part of the design system and tracked, that's a separate discussion. But I think that there's a suddenly a conflict now between product or the website and the design system whenever you're trying to do something that's not in the design system, because now you've got a team whose job it is to make sure that the design system has fidelity with what's going on, and it creates a barrier and it creates conflict.
Yeah.
Now, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Let, let me
I
let me
don't.
comment on
Yeah,
that for a minute. I think just in the
sure.
beginning before you continue, because I think you're spot on about when you give something a name, especially in an organization. Either you're with it or you're not with it, right? I think it's very interesting
Mhm.
from a social standpoint of the line that's drawn in the sand as soon as you make this thing, and then all of a sudden you're in or you're out. Um, I'm going to comment more, I think, about it later because I want you to finish, because I have some thoughts about this, about the difference about how the naming is used to happen for traditional systems, and now if it is important for the world of AI and the systems that we're doing now. But please continue on your thought there.
Yeah, I think I look back on some of the classic like brand books, which in my mind, design systems are kind of the latest version of brand books. they
Right.
they manage the look and feel and the experience, and I think about things like the NASA brand book, that classic 220-page book
Yeah.
that goes through and shows you how to use the NASA logo on satellites, on spaceships, on stickers, little like grids of pull apart color chip samples. That didn't have its own name. They didn't call it like Artemis. They didn't call it, Potemkin. They didn't like give it a name. It was just NASA's, like it was NASA. And today we have like Atlassian. Atlassian's design system is just Atlassian's design system. Very clear, very straightforward. Atlassian's design system is Atlassian, and that breaks down these barriers and allows things to kind of be absorbed and be part of the whole of everything. And for me, one of the biggest issues with design systems is sometimes the conflict that arises whenever you're trying to create a design system. Like you're trying to get adoption, you're trying to serve people, you want to make sure that it's used. You have this balance of carrot and stick where you're trying to enforce its use, but you're always trying to encourage its use. And for me, every barrier that can be torn down makes it easier to use and easier to contribute and easier to be a partner.
Yeah. I love your example of Atlassian as the thing that doesn't have a name. It's literally just Atlassian's design system. It's all you need to know it as. You don't need to know it as, I'll give some examples of the ones that do have names. You have Microsoft Fluent that's out there. You have Shopify Polaris. You have Adobe Spectrum. All of these things are things that have name that are associated with brands. When you again look at Atlassian, it's just Atlassian design system, and that's what it is. And I think that's, I mean, the example is so crystal clear about, when it's just the design system, it is just a part of the organization. When you put the name to it, it looks like a segment of the organization. It's just like this weird piece that brought off in there. But I guess I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here. When we have design system teams that are trying to advocate themselves and justify their existence and, you know, be of themselves a team and a camaraderie, I think it's very common for social groups, forgetting about just, a company, but social groups providing a name to something to, I guess, gain excitement or traction behind a movement to go ahead and make it a thing that is real in the real world. Like we have seen lots of design systems that have diminished or otherwise removed due to it being a cost center. The design system's not making any money. Why should I ever, fund the design system when I have products that are making money out there? And what does it matter if the button, looks a certain way? I mean, and is not the same one as this button over here? We're still making money. What does it matter? And we know why it matters, right? We know the benefit of the design system out there from reuse and trust in the user experience. Absolutely. But I'm thinking about the I guess the human feeling of a team that needs to feel, I guess, validated, and giving this team a name, I guess, helps them from a human standpoint feel like they need that they're able to, um, I guess, exist in the larger org and not get lost. What do you feel about that?
So I think that's an excellent counterpoint, and there are things there that I agree with that
Hmm.
you said, but for me, the that design systems team can just be internally the design systems team. There are many teams inside of organizations that don't have like branded names. Like they're not the Cougars or the Panthers. They're the product team, they're the UX team, they're the you know, was it the growth team, accounts, marketing, HR. These are teams that are defined by like what they do, not with a special kind of name. Some organizations, they do, the marketing team may have like two different like pods of people, and the pods may have different names, and that's cool. That's great. That is more about employee happiness and retention and planning than it is, about the effort that's going into what they do. And so the design system team is a team that is on par with these other teams that needs to internally, communicate their value through the work that they're doing and what they're contributing. I know that it can be difficult and hard, but giving your design system a name isn't necessarily going to make that easier.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back on your side on here because, one of the things that does happen all the time in organizations is, tribal knowledge, abbreviations, all these names and conventions that are difficult to learn when you first on board. You're just like, what is this? What is Polaris? I've never heard of Polaris before. What is that? What does that do for me? Right. But when
Mm.
you call it the design system, that's a more general term, more accepted term, more popular term these days. Right. So
Yeah.
not including this weird name, this fun, name in here, you potentially have more adoption. And I think, that's the other thing that happens all just in, as we all know, design system is largely a naming exercise when it comes down to this stuff. And I think if the naming of things, even the system of itself, can be reduced to some of the more accepted ideas as opposed to being cute or unique, I think you become better off. I mean, I'm thinking about at Compass, we had um, our color palette named after animals. So there would be like, macaw and oh god, we had, I don't remember. I remember macaw specifically because it was a very bright blue. Um, and you would have the animal names, and like, yeah, for the people who have been there, right, who are comfortable with the space and have been familiar with the stuff, you would have these animals, and you'd be like, oh yeah, macaw, whatever the. But you would have people who'd on board and be like, now I got to learn all of these animals that I'll never use anywhere else. Like, how is that going to be helpful for me in the next role? It seems very, specific to what we're doing here. But if we can generalize and take skills and knowledge elsewhere and adopt things from elsewhere, I think it ends up becoming a lot more helpful overall. So yeah, I'm aligned with that. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the separation between traditional design systems work, which I'm going to say the line in the sand being AI, and new design system work now with AI. Because I think traditionally, I think naming a system was probably fine again for the reasons of being social. But I'm thinking, you know, is there any need for the name to exist in an AI world in your point of view, or is everything basically there's no change?
Well, for me, it's no change. Like, going back to Atlassian design system versus Carbon. Both of those design systems have names. It's just one has a custom branded name and the other one is a little bit more direct and clear, and not trying to be kind of its own product. Like, don't get me wrong, the Atlassian design system, I mean, I visited the website prior to coming on the show, and like they've done a great job with it. It's obviously something that's very important to them and they put a lot of time and effort into, but it's not named like it's its own product. Like Carbon feels like it's its own product. Polaris, Fluent, those design systems that you've mentioned, they all feel like they're products. And there is a time and a place for that. For a lot of these like larger corporations, one of the things that they need to do is bring in talent. And by having a branded design system, by having a custom named design system, that gives them something to promote and talk about. And that creates another value center for like, Adobe with Spectrum, but for most companies, for most products, there just isn't a need to have a clever name to back it up, because I just think it creates a barrier, because then suddenly it is, you are not Carbon or you are Carbon.
Yeah. Now I just had a thought that I think, maybe is a wrench in here. We have seen, or at least I know I've seen, maybe you've seen, that you would have a centralized design system, and then you would have these subsystems. It's something I talked about with Brad just yesterday. You have these subsystems that pop up, mostly because some of these pods, these features, will be going too fast for the main design system to address and catch up, right? So you'll have these pods that'll come up. Like, as an example I use all the time is this pod needs a timeline component. Well, that doesn't seem like something that the larger organization needs to have. It's something that this one particular feature needs to have, and therefore they're going to make a component that's reusable across their vertical, as opposed to being for the design system itself. So now that you have a subsystem, right, and a main system, how do you, I guess, differentiate that if and when that occurs?
Yeah, that is where we use language to communicate where things kind of sit on a hierarchy. So for instance, to answer that for me, I think in terms of, so whenever it comes to like relationships with other people, there are close friends, there are friends, and there are acquaintances, and then there's everyone else. For an example like that, the design system can also have rings, like a tree. So you can have components that are core components and supplemental components, or you can have tier 1, 2, and 3 components. You can use the language to communicate what the priority or what the importance of that component is. So for instance, that timeline component may be a supplemental component, which is kind of communicating that this is something that's in use a little bit, and if you want to use it, know that it maybe isn't as robust or fully featured or as road tested as core components are. And so that's where we use language to kind of communicate that and to be able to say that this is how it exists. Another approach, one of the things that like your example makes me think of is like a federated design system,
Right.
where you have like, this is the core of it, but then we have like some sub brands, and the sub brands deviate in the way that they deviate. And so maybe it's a case of, you have like Intuit, for example, has a design system that they have like a parent, but they also have very distinct branding for like QuickBooks, TurboTax, Mint, their sub products. And so it could be like, this is, a Mint design system element.
Yeah.
And so that keeps it, within the product itself without necessarily giving it a name. Like the Mint section of Intuit isn't going to have their own name for a design system.
Yeah, that makes sense for me. I in you speaking about that, the different, I guess, brands that are under an umbrella. Now it makes me think of, well, actually, yeah. Now that makes me think of, um, what about, we were talking about theming earlier. If you're going to introduce a new theme for a brand, right? I'm thinking. I mean, the quintessential example that I think very striking was when Airbnb rebranded from a blue kind of bubbly kind of feel to a red, more modern, sleek kind of feel. Right now, does that need a name? Right? Is it to tell people that this is the old one versus the new one, or is it just V1, V2? Like, how do you feel about that kind of change?
I think that's just a change that happens. Brands update themselves all the time, and usually they do so for good reason. And so that's just for me. It's V1 to V2. It internally there may be some kind of project name for it, because it is human nature, but the reality is to the wider world, that brand rollout doesn't have to be called the, like, the executive suite Airbnb redesign. It's just going from old design to new design, and that's rolling out a redesign is another discussion, a very long one. Because I mean, I'm not going to go off on that tangent, but yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that'll be a tangent for the next time that we get Randy on the show for sure, because I definitely want to talk about theming. I don't know why I might want to talk about theming. I would never know.
Oh no.
Why.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking. So okay. So whenever I think about a redesign, I think about okay. So thinking about a redesign, for me, people react very strongly whenever things change.
Yes.
And whether it's good or bad, whether there's a good reason or a bad reason, there's always people who push back, and there's always something negative on that.
Mm-hmm.
And rolling out a new change, you want to try and make it as easy for people as possible. Look at Reddit. Reddit wanted to IPO, so they got in touch with Pentagram. They had Pentagram rebrand them, and they came up with a new interface for Reddit. And what they found is that the transition that they had like this new version of Reddit, but they've maintained the old version of Reddit. It's going on 2 years now. That old version of Reddit is still there because so many people who go to Reddit do not want that new version, that they want to maintain the old version. And so now they're stuck maintaining two different versions of it because they want to keep their user base happy.
Yeah. No, that reminds me all the times that Facebook changed its interface while many of us were on Facebook, right? So like I would remember all the times where people would be like, "Oh, they changed it again. Where's this? Where's that?" Right? And it's really just all about meeting user expectations, right? You could have the cleanest, sickest, most beautiful designed thing that was put together in a laboratory effectively, right? That is, okay, we're going to do it like this. And you plop it in there and suddenly it's like, well, that didn't work, you know? And seeing that happen with social media sites in particular, because they have so many users and the users are so vocal about what's going on. So Reddit is a great example of another platform that would show the vocalness of a change like that, as opposed to, again, like a productivity application, right? Productivity application, the person still needs to be there to get the job done. So they're gonna, hustle through it, blood, sweat, tears, whatever, to get their goal about whatever change it is. But when it's a social media app, then they could take it or leave it. And if they're going to just take it or leave it, I mean, they're going to complain if they're about to leave it and go somewhere else and do this other thing. So yeah, that's a really great example. And yeah, I mean, it's, when it comes to theming, I mean, I talk about this in the book about the importance of the naming of this stuff being intentional, because trying to find an intentional name is sometimes hard for designers. Some people have difficulty understanding the reason why this decision is happening inside of an experience. And that's a lot of the things that I love to speak about and what I've written in the book. Um, I want to go back to the thought I had about AI and the possibility of I guess change in here, and I think your perspective on this is going to be really, I think, interesting and certainly valuable from just the story you told earlier about the Figma, not the Figma, the InDesign and Excel spreadsheet automation, because now with AI, there's lots of things that are being automated out here, and I'm definitely interested to know what you are automating if you are. But the one thing that I want to talk about here is, um, you have this design system product, has a name, right? Has people on it, all these things that are associated with it traditionally. Um, if these changes are happening with AI, such that you know we're instead of having a documentation site, which of course would be associated with a name and stuff like that, now people are using chats to interact with the design system. Um,
Mhm.
I think we're seeing less and less of the system being a thing that people even know exists, right? And like I'm just saying, like if you're in a chat window, whether it's Figma or VS Code or whatever system you're in a chat window and you have the resources of the system as data in the back over there, and it's just making things aligned to that system. I mean, is there really even a system at all to even consider naming? Like, or if we don't give it a name because everything is just AI potentially, is that going to belittle the system's importance now with AI? What are your thoughts on that?
So I don't think that the name is going to influence one way or another with AI. I think that people who are using AI to engage with a design system are going to get the value out of it that they're trying to extract. So for instance, one of the things that I use AI for is to generate documentation.
Mhm.
Okay, to like generate Google Docs, generate slide decks, things like that. And having access to AI allows me to more easily use design choices that I've created. I've gone in and uh, Figma Figma slides. You can use South Left's Figma MCP server to go in and create slides for you using AI, using Claude. And I've done that using design systems, and it works pretty good. I'm very happy with it. Like go in, make a couple of changes, and hey, this is perfect and on brand, which is really nice, which is something that historically has been difficult to do. If you've worked in any organization, slide decks are always chaotic messes.
Yes.
Google Docs or Word docs are always chaotic messes because no one knows how to format except for one person, and their documents look great. And it's AI is making it a lot easier to do those sorts of things. AI is also connecting with a lot of tooling that's making it a lot easier to generate what you need. So, for instance, Figma has Figma Buzz, which allows a designer to create like basically templates for users to enter in what they need, make a couple of choices, and output the graphics that they need. The same is true for like doing display ads. You can enter in what you need for a display ad and generate display ads very, very quick. I think there's Bear Banner or Banner Bear was doing this like a number of years ago, where like you create a banner once and it would do different permutations, and it was generally successful at it, and it saved agencies a lot of time. And so AI is and design systems are absolutely like peanut butter and chocolate coming together to empower people to do the things that they need to do much faster and easier, even if it's just setting up like colors. I mean, one of the things that I did recently on a project is I was sent a couple of brand books by a client, and it had a bunch of colors in there. And usually I would go in and copy the hex codes and enter the hex codes as variables. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a computer do this. And so I asked Claude to do it, uploaded a couple of PDFs, and it made a series of Figma variables for me that I was very happy with. And it took 8 minutes.
Yeah. No, you can't. You can't fight something like that, right? Especially with the time saved
Mhm.
and the quality that we're getting, which I think is a your mileage may vary, in my opinion, in that kind of that idea, because when you mentioned about making the tokens and the colors, I'm always very wary about that, especially when I've known AI to be very Tailwind focused, right? So it likes the Tailwind classes and things like that. And I spoke to Matthew Strom on about this because we had a whole show about Tailwind actually. And one of the things that I find Tailwind lacking, of course, is the lack of semantics that I find very important when it comes to theming and expressions and things like that. So, when it's generating tokens for you, is it generating a scale of tokens, or is it generating semantic stuff that is what I would call more flexible for theming purposes? Which is it? Or is it both?
Sure. So, in the example that I mentioned, the first thing that I wanted to do was get the colors into Figma so that I could start designing. And this was in the messy phase of design, where I'm not thinking about systems. I'm thinking about creativity. I'm thinking about how's this going to look? How's it going to feel? I use a little bit of auto layout whenever I'm in that phase, but for the most part, I'm just kind of shuffling things around, really just kind of figuring out how I want to block things, how I want to think about things. And then the next phase is taking and starting to make definitions from things. And for me, that's generally done by hand because I'm looking at the design that I've done and I go, okay, I think this is the foreground color and this is the background color and this is primary, secondary. This is, these are the different colors for different purposes, and then I start assigning it. And generally that's done by hand. But I have from time to time kind of gone in and asked AI to take a stab at it. Like, what do you think the primary colors would be? What do you think? Give me what you think would happen, and that gives me something to react to.
Mm.
It allows me to experiment and honestly iterate faster. Because if I have a series of variables in Figma and I have the list of semantic variables, I can ask AI to create a new mode and make different choices.
Right.
And then I can apply those different modes, and that allows me to experiment and iterate faster.
Yeah.
Because I can also ask it to remove a mode. I'd be like, mode 2 isn't working for me. Please remove all of those variables. And it will delete all of that. And I don't have to worry about it or make small changes.
Yeah, I mean, what we've definitely seen is AI is definitely good at patterns. I think once you have had something set, however you feel like that makes sense to you, then having the several modes being set up for light, dark, Easter, whatever you like, is something that is easily iterable. Like you're exactly what you're saying. I'm just again thinking about the 500 tokens that people have out there, and hopefully people are not leaving it, giving AI the wheel entirely. Sometimes you definitely again have a human in the loop, and I think the review thing that you're talking about, and parts of the hand parts of the process, because that's the thing I'm interested in, is speaking with a lot of our practitioners, especially when it comes to AI. Where is AI in our practice? Right, because it's there, right? It's there, but where is it there? And I mentioned this in the show earlier about the design system report from Zero Height, and in that report it says that many design system teams are smaller than they used to be, but they're also not utilizing AI as much as they could be, or really. I think the question was automations, which would put AI in there. So, what other automations or AI kind of things are you experimenting with for your systems now?
Sure. My favorite use of AI for things like that is to create tooling to supplement my thinking. So, for instance, one of the things that I've been experimenting with recently is fluid spacing.
Okay.
So fluid design is something that I think is really awesome, but I've always objected to using it because I feel that the spacing has to be fluid as well. And so generally the work that I've done, I've had static values for spacing, margin padding, and so I've resisted fluid values for text because that, it really bothers me that the space between a heading and a paragraph aren't growing at the same rate that the text is. And so I finally kind of sat down and I was like, okay, listen, let's figure out like how easy or difficult would this be to implement, one in Figma and two in a like to generate that sort of thing. And so what I did was I created tools, code tools that let me say like, okay, I want this cadence of typography. I want it to be like this size at largest, this size at smallest, and basically created my own interface for creating custom type scales and creating custom spacing scales that are related to each other. And so now I've got these tools that are sitting here on my computer that I can use at any time that I can also with AI tell it like, okay, I want you to take these values and put them into Figma as variables with this kind of structure. And so that my mental model, I refer to it as scaffolding. Okay, because when you're doing construction, you don't think about the fact that you have to build scaffolding. Like you're literally building scaffolding, and the entire purpose of building it is to eventually tear it down because it's temporary. And so all of these tools and using AI to generate these tools very quickly are so great. For instance, I was working on a project where a client wanted to have custom button colors and was concerned about the legibility of the text on the buttons on their color palette. Okay. And so without AI, I would have gone into Figma, made a bunch of buttons, applied a bunch of colors, and it would have taken me a long time to iterate over this. But instead I used AI and I said, hey, here are the color palettes, give me a table of these as buttons and tell me the contrast ratios on these and whether or not it should have like a light or dark. And it generated an HTML file for me that I shared in a meeting with the client. And I said, hey, look, these are all of the different permutations of this. These are ones that pass, ones that don't. The ones that don't, we can either not use or we can, adapt depending on, how easy or difficult that would be. And it made that process faster.
Yeah. Okay. So I love that example because the examples that I've heard for a long time was use AI for prototyping, right? You wouldn't necessarily put in your code base, even though that's what's happening right now. But I've heard a lot of this prototyping thing. Oh, let's see, the prototype. Let's see if it hits the fence. And then, unfortunately, some sea creature finds it and it was like, oh no, let's put that in production right now. I really love that. But I think the thing that you mentioned about making the tools that will help you with the actual work that needs to be done and the scaffold and effectively again the throwaway stuff that makes it hard. I mean, what's coming to mind right now is the tools in order to help with theming, exactly what you're talking about. Showing the contrast ratios, showing what this color is going to do, how it's going to. I mean, I used to vibe code Chrome extensions that would be effectively theme editors, where you could go ahead and change the page theme on the application you're working on. So vibe coding a solution as a tool that's going to help you in the large ecosystem or architecture of the thing that you're working on, I think is an excellent example of working through a problem like this. I will also say we're gonna have to bring you on the show a couple of times because your thought about the fluid spacing in relation to topography, I also have thoughts on that I think conflict with your thoughts. Oh my God, that's another 15 minutes or 20 minutes of talking that we're not gonna start now. But I definitely would be love to talk to you about that in some future for sure. But one last, I guess, conversation or question we'll have before we wrap up here today is, I guess, we talked about automation, we talked about the naming. What's the next thing that guess you want to see in design systems with all the technology that we're seeing now? What's the next step that we need to take as a practice with all the changes that we're seeing right now?
My number one request, like my dream, like I have a magic wand and I'm going to wave it and I get this, is basically a way for designers to create compositions with code. So, for instance, because in my opinion, the code is the truth. Like I believe in material honesty. This concept that, if you have wood, let it be wood. If you have metal, let it be metal. If you have the web, let it be the web. And for me, as much as I love working in Figma and it's a great tool, what gets served to the client is the web.
Yes.
Or native apps. And for me, as a designer, I need to work in that space.
Yes.
And so the closer we can get to that, the better off we are. Like I've experimented with pencil.dev, and it's got a very interesting approach. It's worth checking out. I've checked out Webflow. I really like how Webflow is, you're literally writing CSS with toolbars. Framer is really good. Like it's built on like React and it's really strong and allows you to create things that are more native in a way that's visual. And so for me, the closer we can get to actually designing in the code without writing code, like I'm comfortable writing code, but I know not every designer is, but the best thing that we can do is to do that, because the closer we get to that material honesty, the better we are. I remember years ago, you mentioned the color macaw, and it made me think of the Kickstarter for the Macaw app, which was a website, a visual website builder that it was basically what Webflow turned out to be.
Okay.
And so Macaw was funded. It was bought by Envision, and then, everything that had happened with Envision happened. But for me, it is a designer being able to design using code and seeing things natively.
Yeah. I love that. And material honesty, I've never heard the term before, but oh my God, so great. I love that. I'm going to steal that from you. Thank you, Randy. It's a really great
It's my
term.
gift to you.
Yeah. Goodness. Because it's a similar thing that I've said as well is, I use the analogy of a painter where, you as an artist, you can find some paint in the art store and start painting on, I don't know, wood or paper or whatever, but you get a lot better results if you know about all of the materials that you're using when you are creating your art. So, there's a difference between, the fabric canvas versus I guess a cowhide canvas, or oil paint versus the acrylic, and all these things. And it's not saying that you need to make your own paint or make your own canvas, but knowing about the materials is going to bring you a long way in terms of your expertise than, again, just picking up some stuff and trying it out. So I have always aligned to designers understanding the medium in which they're designing, and I always felt that Figma was not it. Just because the thing is a artboard in the web, it never really aligned to the web, right? You get auto layout, years later, and you're like, okay, thanks, I guess, and yeah, I always thought like Framer was, when that came out, the direction that everyone was going to take, because they effectively came out roughly the same time. When all this came down, I was like, oh, Framer makes a lot more sense from getting to production what design wants, because then in this world you would just have the design system go into Framer, and then the designer would just pick the components that were already code in Framer into their artboard, so to speak, and then push that up as a prototype, or even close to production. Like all of the engineer would need to potentially do in those cases is wire an API to it and kind of be done, but it didn't unfortunately take off. It ended up staying to be the the artboards that we see. But I think certainly with AI now, we already see people and designers getting closer and closer to the code,
Mhm.
even if it's not the quality that we necessarily expect. But I'm hoping that that improves over time, and only time will tell. But what a great wrap up, I think, for the show here. Randy, I want you to give the opportunity to let the folks know, where they could find you on the internet, anything that you might want to plug. Let them know what's going on.
Sure. So my Venmo, I'm
Perfect.
kidding. I'm
Why
kidding.
not? Go
No,
ahead.
no, my the best way to get in touch with me is on LinkedIn, Randy Oest, OEST. I'm on LinkedIn. I post just about every day. I'm very active there, so that's the best place to find me. I'm also available at amazingrando.com. And yeah, I don't have anything to plug. I guess I've got to write a book for the next time I'm on the show.
Yeah, hell yeah. I would love to read that book. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Randy, for being on the show. And thank you for watching the show. Really appreciate it. Before you go, please help out the show by, smashing the like and subscribe button, just, of course, to get notified the next time that we go live. And feel free to continue the conversation on the official Design Systems Discord by visiting discord.ds.house. There it is on the bottom there. Play nice in those comments, and I'll see you on the internet. Bye.